Good afternoon, everybody. I know you all just ate and you're a little lethargic. Good afternoon, everybody. It is a pleasure to introduce this wonderful next segment, but let me start by telling you, my name is Newton Sandon, President and CEO of OIC of South Florida. We're enthused about having you today at a two-day segment of what we're calling our Middle Class Summit. And so what does that mean exactly? To build, elevate, and to sustain the middle class. Well, I'm not going to steal the thunder of our great panelists here today to be followed by those tomorrow. But one of the things we know, and you talk about elevating the middle class, we'd be remiss if we didn't get a chance to hear from the voices of, I understand some call them millennials, but the term that they prefer is emerging leaders. Is that correct? Yeah. All right, I got the memo. And so they represent a substantial part of our workforce to date and to come. And so we wanted to make sure that we gave them an opportunity to express their concerns, their observations, and opportunities. And to those in the rooms who fall into that category of being a millennial, my comment to you along with the panelists is this. If any organization or leadership is serious about change, you have to be thinking ahead of you. And so with that, we know that these emerging leaders will do just that. They will emerge into the workforce, but it is a matter of preparation. It is a matter of aligning their aspirations to be informed. And it is a matter of creating opportunities for them to be able to use those segments respectively. And so to the emerging leaders, I'll get there, I promise. The one thing that I would share with you that really, really burns into my spirit is talking about your aspirations. The word aspiration really, really resonates with me a lot because it's about what you aspire to do, a desire, that throttle that thrives you, that trajects what it is that you want to be when you grow up, as you've often heard that term, and whether it's in K through 12, in high school, et cetera. And I would tell you this, the most important thing that I've always learned is that you take something that is in line with your innate talents and abilities, your passion, and more importantly, your purpose in life. And if you turn that into career to contribute to society and to yourself and your families, that formula is typically a formula for success. And so one of the things I think we have a great opportunity to build upon and do better is making sure that young people have what we call informed aspirations. You hear me talk about this a little bit more tomorrow, but way too young often, and not these folks, of course, because they're way beyond high school years. But when you ask young people in high school, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's a doctor, it's a football player, it's a rapper, it's Beyonce. Well, I could tell you, I'm no Beyonce, trust me when I tell you that. But my point is to the emerging leaders, be sure to tap into and be highly focused on what your aspirations are. I think we got an opportunity to do much, much better in our K through 12 system to continue to make sure people's aspirations are aligned, again, with their innate talents and abilities and purpose to make sure that they're coherent and make sense. So, again, I welcome everybody in this room. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attendance. We had a great segment this morning for those who joined us. And I'm going to turn it over to, again, the future of our country, the future of our workforce, what we call them emerging leaders. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Knapp. I'm the Executive Director of Strategic Partnerships at FIU here in Miami. Just wanted to give you a quick rundown on me prior to our panel discussion, and we actually have a few presentations today. So I'm going to give you, it's not about me, so I want to just do this quick right off the bat. You guys can read my bio. I'm on that cusp of that, what we like to call the emerging leader millennial. I feel as if I can straddle the line and kind of go either way when people ask, oh, so that's kind of a little bit of a millennial mindset, or that's more of a Gen X mindset, whatever that may be. We're going to talk a lot about that today. Everybody in here is going to get a lot of information, going to get a lot of questions answered. So if you have any questions or thoughts or anything on your mind that you want to ask the panelists, please write those down. We are going to have a question and answer session later on as soon as we're done. And it's going to be open to the floor. And we're also going to have, I believe, a text in for answering of a question as well. So thank you guys for being here so much. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to introduce Ali Bustamante. He's a professor at Florida International University. concentrating in labor and policy studies. He's done some research. He's got a short PowerPoint, but it's going to do a really good job of frameworking and putting together what we have going for you today. So I'll go ahead and introduce Ali. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the OIC for putting this event together, as well as Florida International University and the Green School of International and Public Affairs for giving me this opportunity to be here today. What I want to talk to you about is when we think about the middle class, what are we thinking about? What are we talking about when we say middle class? We know that there is no one definition for the middle class. Therefore, let's try to unpack and let's be a little bit clear about who we're talking about. First and foremost, when we actually think about the middle class, by and large, we think of the group of individuals, the group of households that ultimately comprise somewhere between 66% and 200% of the median income in the state or in the city or nationwide. And ultimately, this is a broad and encompassing view of what the middle class is, one that's ultimately pushing forward this view that most of us are in fact middle class, that absent high levels of privilege or absent relatively low levels of constraints, we're generally, most of us, are middle class. And that's really the general conception of when we think about the middle class, this aspirational class, this class that can ultimately facilitate growth over time, both within the middle class, but also hopefully achieving upper class incomes over time. What's been problematic over the past several years is the fact that the middle class has actually shrunk in size as a relative proportion of other classes in the state of Florida. And this is something also that we've seen locally here in South Florida. The fact that the middle class is not as robust as it once was. The fact that today it's increasingly difficult to transition from the working class to the middle class, as we've seen also equally difficulties transitioning from the middle class to the upper class. And what that ultimately puts us is in a challenge that we're currently facing today, where we know that the middle class is the engine of economic growth, where we know that the middle class is the engine of productivity, entrepreneurship, and yet this is an engine that is currently stuck in second gear for the moment. And what's problematic as we go moving forward is that this is a decline that we've seen gradually be exacerbated over time, and particularly with the Great Recession. When we look at the Great Recession, and we look at the incomes associated with the income declines that have been associated with the Great Recession, we see by and large that most households, most individuals have actually not bounced back. They're still in the process of an economic recovery in their wallets, although we know that there's been an economic recovery nationwide as well as statewide. And what this also lets us keep in mind is that when we think about the middle class, on average, they're households that earn approximately $45,000 a year. These aren't lucrative salaries, these aren't lucrative incomes. They're modest, comfortable incomes. That's what we oftentimes conceptualize as the middle class, and when we look at the research, when we unpack the numbers, that's exactly what we find. We find that there's a large disparity in incomes associated with working class, middle class, and upper class incomes. In particular, we see that upper class households have almost twice as high incomes. Actually, I'm sorry, more than twice as high incomes as the average middle class family does. Which again, it really goes to the point that the middle class is truly an aspirational class, one that is focused on achieving greater economic mobility as well as social mobility. And when we think of the middle class, one of the exercises that I think is useful to look at, this is a composition of all of the main occupations in the state of Florida. If you look at this for a second, we kind of can see that by and large, the greatest occupations that comprise the majority of workers are things like sales, office and administrative support jobs, and to a lesser extent, things like food prep and management. These are the jobs that we oftentimes see as the plethora of jobs of people that we know and hold dear to us. These are the jobs that most people work. Looking at the middle class, it's drastically different. It's drastically similar, I should say. What we know is that the majority of workers are in fact reflective of what the middle class looks like today. And what's interestingly is that many of these occupations span working class, middle class, and upper class incomes. which is to say that many of the jobs that we currently have in the state of Florida, and particularly here in South Florida, particularly sales, particularly office and administrative jobs, are jobs that ultimately facilitate growth over time. What's been problematic after the recession, since the economic recovery, is the fact that many of these traditional occupations just are not facilitating the economic growth that they once have. They're not facilitating the personal growth in incomes that they traditionally have. It's much more difficult to start entry level in one occupation and expect that that occupation's ultimately going to take you to the promised land of high incomes. That used to be the case. It used to be the case that the returns on education were relatively fixed over time, and that experience paid off, that hard work paid off, that productivity ultimately paid off. What we're ultimately seeing today is that that tradition has been drastically eroded, particularly since the economic recession. Instead, we certainly have a much more economically polarized labor force and economy in which education is a huge factor shaping and to a certain extent locking in the incomes. Experience has certainly over time been discounted, while education, particularly high levels of education and high levels of skills attainment, have ultimately obtained a very high premium. And so when we think of, how does this manifest itself in terms of the salaries and wages that we currently see in our economy? So these are looking at the occupations, some of the main occupations in the state of Florida, and the share of these occupations that pay either $10 or $15 an hour. And what we see are, unsurprising facts of industries, for example, food prep and service. When we think of the restaurant industry, hospitality, where just about over 80% of these occupations, of these jobs in these industries, are ultimately relatively low-paying jobs. Even when we move forward to things like sales and sales occupations, as well as office administrative occupations, we're seeing that almost half of these occupations are relatively modest or low-paying occupation or low-paying jobs, which is to say, these occupations that have traditionally flourished and facilitated economic progress among Floridians, and particularly South Floridians, they're just not doing that to the same extent. And by and large, one of the main reasons for that is that most of the jobs in these occupations have transitioned from being middle-income jobs to a greater share of them being low-income jobs. What this ultimately tells us is that if we want to achieve a much more sustainable middle class, if we want to achieve much more robust economic mobility in the state of Florida, and particularly here in South Florida, we have to diversify some of these occupations, particularly diversify our occupations. We have to move towards occupations that really tap into the strengths of our local workforce. And talking about specifically about the millennial generation, we have to look at occupations that ultimately take their strengths and leverage them in a position that make these companies and these businesses that ultimately employ and will be employing a large share of millennials into productive and very prominent industries and occupations in our local economy. And who is this going to impact? But by and large, it's going to be most people. When you look at the middle class relative to the upper class in particular, it's a very diverse class. Again, we're thinking about a class that's evenly split between men and women, that has a large share of immigrants, a large share of ethnic and racial diversity. So when we think of building the middle class, when we think of expanding the middle class and reviving in many ways the middle class and the occupations associated with the middle class, we're talking about reviving the broader economy and reviving this broader trend associated with who we are in the state of Florida, a much more diverse group of a generation that is robustly diverse and different than prior generations, and one that needs to be leveraged and needs to be tapped in a way that we haven't in the past. And so we can see that much of the reasons why we've seen this decline in the middle class, this shrinking of the middle class, as well as a decline in middle-income jobs, has really been we as a state and we as entrepreneurs and policymakers have really hit a wall to truly absorb this wealth that is certainly out there, which is the millennial generation, and particularly this more diverse and different workforce than we've had in the past. there is much productivity gains to be had by pursuing policies that ultimately tap into these populations in a much more effective way than we had in the past, and the fruits of which will ultimately be lucrative and much more widely spread than they have in the past as well. We're talking about reviving the middle class to ensure broader prosperity, to ensure that future generations have a different and encompassed capacity to achieve social and economic mobility in a way that prior generations had, but the current generations currently are not experiencing at the moment. So while in a way, some of the facts that I've presented today have been somewhat sobering in terms of the shrinking middle class, I would certainly leave with saying that in terms of progress, there are many channels that can facilitate progress, and I think this conversation today is really pointing to one of these main channels of middle class progress, which is tapping the millennial generation, both in terms of the workforce, but in terms of their presence in our community, and really allowing them to contribute the high levels of productivity, the high levels of skills, and unique talents that I think can ultimately revive and push forward our communities as well as our local economy. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Professor, for that wonderful presentation. My name is Adriana Fazzano Ficano, and it is my pleasure to serve as the Chief of Staff and Associate Vice President for Corporate Relations at Broward College. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce one of my new bosses, so I better impress her, Mildred Coyne. Mildred is the Executive Director of Workforce Education and Economic Development at Broward College, and her motto is ensuring all students have access to high-quality educational programming that focuses on relevant career goals. Mildred's professional and personal mission began 25 years ago. She's a 25-year professional in higher education in the state of Florida. She's focused her career on helping to guide students to make educational choices mapped to careers that improve both the quality of life and local economy. And as our executive director of workforce education for the college, she oversees our career and technical education as well as corporate services. Please join me in inviting Dr. Mildred Coyne.
Thanks, Adriana. Well, it is really my distinct privilege to be here with you today. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I am not a millennial. I am a cusper of the other sort on the other end, but it's okay because we all support and nurture and grow each other within our workplace. So I've learned an enormous amount by working with Adriana and Maggie and some others. So it's been a real pleasure. One of the things that I really wanted to start with is really just to ask you a question. So what's in a job? What's in a career? Is it a calling? Is it a career? Or is it a wage? Is it just a means to an end? So perhaps it can be all of those things, but I contend that it's much more than that. I believe that a job leads to a person's sense of purpose and connection to their value statement in society, how they feel connected, giving people a sense of self-worth and an opportunity to contribute. It can change a life, it can change families, it can change neighborhoods and communities. So I feel very passionately about the work that we do in higher education to make sure that we're providing educational training and programming so that people have access into the middle class, those middle skilled jobs, and making sure that we're overcoming that skills gap. But yet, no matter all the work we do, the headlines still keep coming. Where are all the middle skilled jobs? The skills gap is real. Supply of skilled workers fails to meet demand. But we know that we have to overcome these barriers, and we have to continue to look and strive to see what does our workforce look like so that we can make sure as many people as possible have access into that marketplace. So today, but specifically talking about millennials, so it's really important because I think sometimes we think that the middle class is someone other than us, or someone that doesn't look like our children, or but they are. And I have 4 children, and seeing them struggle to find access into the labor market was really challenging, and looking at all different ways to help engage them. And I'm well resourced. If we've talked about Newton, is, my kids have resources, but what about the communities and the families that don't have the higher education knowledge or any kind of academic knowledge to know where those opportunities exist to help people connect to the marketplace, to education that will connect them to the marketplace. But so for millennials today, there's 30% of our marketplace is made up of millennials. But in 10 years, that'll increase to 75%. So let's be real about this. How are we going to help these millennials make sure that they're transitioning into the workplace in meaningful and connected ways? One of the things that I really find fascinating is that there is a job to education ratio. So for one job, I'm sorry, the ratio is 1:7. I always stumble with this. I don't know why. I use it all the time. There's one job for every person with a master's degree. One job for every person with a master's degree. You're all in it. You're all in your one job. There's 2 jobs for every person with a bachelor's degree. But there are 7 jobs for every person with a certificate or an associate's degree, a technical marketable skill. So this is from the U.S. Department of Labor. It's a statistic that's held true over the last several, probably 10 years, and it's still a reality that we have to help our millennials to understand what it is that they can do to gain entry into that labor market and into those middle class jobs. So the Department of Labor also tells us that jobs of today are looking different. So I grew up in Pittsburgh. My father worked in a steel mill. He was a part of a labor union, and he went to work every day, and he, at the end of his 30 years, was handed a somewhat diminished pension because the steel industry left. But he still, it was a completely different environment in which he went to live and work and raise a family in. Our jobs today are not long-term commitments by employers, that they're much more consultant-based. Freelance is a common word for our millennial generation. Education beyond high school is an expectation. My dad did not have education beyond high school, nor did my mother, and that was okay. They managed to raise 7 kids, and it was okay, but not today. Education beyond high school is required for entering into the labor market. We also have an enormous amount of changes in technology and trends that are causing emerging markets that didn't even exist 5 years ago, 1 year ago. So how are we helping to educate and prepare people so that they can gainfully access those occupations? It's all about building an employee that doesn't just have one trick. They also have access to being able to use a high level of emotional intelligence. You hear a lot about our soft skills conversation. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Making sure that we have well-rounded students that can be flexible and team workers and problem solvers in the workplace with the skill set that they come to the marketplace with. Employers say all the time, yes, it's a skills gap, but it's not necessarily the skills gap that you think. It's not necessarily hard skills that we're lacking. We're lacking the ability for a person to come to work every day with the commitment and passion and professionalism to help us solve our workplace problems, to work well in teams, to be a collegial have a great collegiality within their employees. So our good friends at the Education Advisory Board created this model called the T-shaped professional. And I think it's really appropriate because it is actually what we're seeing time over time in the labor market. This is the challenge that we have in filling that skills gap. The T-shaped professional across the top is for collaboration, and it might be a little hard to read, but I'll share it with you. So it's universal competencies across the roles and workplace. It's the ability to empathize with clients and colleagues, experiences with people from other cultures. And then the base of the T, the STEM, is for those technical skills. So it's unmatched knowledge of a highly demand skill or process or product. And so it's a combination of those that makes a marketable person. And I think many of our millennials get this because they tend to have the tech savviness. That's usually one of their characteristics that they get labeled with. But it's also finding that occupational balance between the technical skills that you need and then also the emotional intelligence you need to work successfully with others and to be thriving in the workplace. So soft skills. I've talked a little bit about soft skills, and these are just some of the ways that we call them. They're emotional intelligence, they're being able to solve conflict, make decisions, use good judgment, but many of us know it as work ethic, and being able to put your phone down when you're in a meeting, turn your phone off, not be buzzing, and having that respect for your employer, that they are in fact paying you a wage and have an expectation for that wage, and you are there to learn and grow. And many of our employers, in fact, the Gallup and Manpower studies both, in a recent Manpower study of survey of executives, 48% cited the lack of technical skills as the most significant barrier to filling hiring needs, but 44% found it difficult to fill jobs because candidates lacked soft skills. So it seems simple enough, right? But this isn't something that you can just teach in a seminar. And my good friend Jerry Caper and I have been talking about this for a year or so now. You can't just teach soft skills in a seminar. It's something that has to be indoctrinated into our educational practices and modeled in all levels of our future workforce's engagement with people and society. And so, as I conclude, I want to share with you some of the things that we've done. Oops, I didn't have that in my printed copies. Oh, yes, I did. So one of the tools that we use at Broward College is called Burning Glass, and it's a real-time labor market data analyst tool, and it combs through job descriptions, job postings from all across the country, even Craigslist. It pulls from live job postings, and it's artificial intelligence that spiders out into the web and finds all sorts of keywords and compiles data based on what's currently being posted in our labor market. And these are a little small, I know, but I'm happy to share any of this research that we have with you. This is about Broward's top 10 skills in greatest demand, and this is just using this one dynamic tool to say, tell me the top 10 skills. So they're definitely tied to occupations, but they're still skills that cross many spectrums and industry sectors: accounting, sales, repair, scheduling, patient care, and SQL Server. So it's being able to code and work with technology. And then at the same time, we're able to really drill in and look at what are the top greatest in-demand industry certifications, as well as, and then the other one on the other side is specific to information technology occupations. And looking at what do people need to be able to gain entry into this marketplace. Because there are really great jobs other than what we hear all the time. But there's really great jobs that are outside of our frame of reference. So we tend to know about jobs that we're consumers of, right? We know teacher, lawyer, doctor, nurse. We know what those occupations are all about. But it's about helping our young people or our students in education understanding their way to connect to the marketplace may not be in a job that they know even exists. So my story is one of my sons went to Broward College once I started working here. He was finished. He was kind of floundering, lost, didn't know where he was going to fit into the marketplace. Started taking an AS degree in accounting technology. He ended up in an internship and is now a computer consultant for one of the fastest growing software companies in the country. He doesn't have any, I've lived with him for all these years. He doesn't have any special, remarkable skills. He just was capable of learning and manipulating technology and using resources to solve problems. They liked him. He kept learning. He's gotten multiple certifications. Now you think he's the youngest dual certified professional in that company. And some of it was happenstance. He happened to be at Broward College. We started an internship. He happened to know me. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those opportunities don't exist for all of our young people. And helping them to understand that it's not just teacher, lawyer, doctor, nurse. He never would have in a million years thought about, first of all, computer science. I've talked to him about that. No, not interested. He wasn't. So we have to use terms that make much more sense and stop using Department of Labor occupational titles because they're connected to things that aren't relatable to a different generation. So I share with you these to let you know that this information exists. It's readily available to you. Broward College is a partner in this community, and we're happy to share it with anyone who wants or needs to understand better what our skills gap is and what skills are needed. And then one of the things that we like to do is we really like to break down that topic of what are the occupations that are in demand. And so we create these hot jobs posters every quarter or twice or 3 or 4 times a year. And this particular one we just finished, and it's hot jobs for millennials in South Florida. And it looks very specifically at a occupation. So this one said, and there's handouts on your table. I brought about 50, so I'm happy to get you some more if you're interested. It just goes through exactly what a person wants to know. Even though we know that a job is more than a job, it's also a sense of purpose and a sense of self-worth, they also want to know how much they're going to make. right? I mean, that's one of the first things people want to know every time they say, well, that's a great job. Well, how much am I going to make? And so we kind of break that down, and we tell you what you can be called and what you'll make and what you can expect in South Florida for that occupation. So I applaud you for caring, for listening, and for trying to understand the skills gap, and to also connect with our millennials, because 75% of the workforce is going to be our millennials, and I'm excited to be a proud sponsor of the millennials in my workforce that I work with. So thank you.
Let's put our hands together one more time for them. I thought that was 2 great presentations. Thank you both. That was amazing, and I think, as we move into the panelist discussion, you guys will see, it's going to be a bit seamless, because a lot of these things that we talked about during their presentations, which was the soft skills gap, and a lot of the things that Dr. Bustamante put together, we're gonna bring together here in the discussion. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually throw it over to the panelists, and I'm gonna have Adriana start, and I'm gonna have them introduce themselves. You've got their bios right there in your programs, but I'm gonna go ahead and have them introduce themselves and talk a little bit about themselves, because they would probably do a better job of that than I would. But please, Adriana, please begin.
Sure. So again, I'm Adriana Fazzano Ficano. I serve at Broward College as the Chief of Staff and Associate VP for Corporate Relations. Just a long-winded way of saying I oversee the management of the Executive Office of the President. I help oversee community relations, external affairs, and now I deal with corporate partnerships externally. So anytime that we need to partner up with an entity like the OIC and do either internships, panels, or even some corporate training. This panel means a lot to me because I was a liberal arts major at a liberal arts school in Massachusetts. So artsy-fartsy history, 20th century history major. I was one of these big old, I had this part of the T and not this part of the T. And so I hit my mid-20s and went, oh my God, how am I going to pay rent and sustain myself? And if you would have told 22-year-old college graduating me in Massachusetts that I was going to work for a community college doing what I do now, I never would have believed you. And I tried the teacher, lawyer, doctor, nurse. If you Google me enough, you'll figure out that my senior year, I thought I was going to medical school. I tried to go to law school, and then I ended up in academia. And I love it. And who knows where I'll be in another 10 years, but it really is kind of our token as millennials. And I know we're just doing intros, but I wanted to share that piece.
No, that was good. Thank you for the background. Maggie?
Hello, I'm Maggie Gunther. I'm the Director of Communications and Programs for the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance, which is your local economic development organization here in Broward County. Very glad to be here and supporting the Middle Class Summit along with everyone at the Alliance. I fit in the older end of the millennial generation, much like James. There's kind of a,
I'm gonna let that slide. I don't really know what just happened, but I'm gonna let that slide.
I thought that's what you said. So
No.
There's actually an article online. It's a great article about the sort of a bit of a dividing line between the two parts of the millennial generation, and they call us, I see you nodding your head, the Oregon Trail portion of the generation, which means that we grew up playing this game on Apple IIe computers and computer labs as kids in elementary school and up. So we were starting to be those first, not digital natives, but digital babies. We were right in there. And so when you compare somebody who's 35 to somebody who's 23 and just getting out of college, there's obviously some differences in the generation, but we also do have a lot in common. And I see that because I'm involved in a lot of different young professionals groups in Broward County and have chaired them. So I've worked with people my age as a young professional and then started to get older and older and see them getting younger and younger. Anyway, that's a long-winded way to say that I'm involved with a lot of these organizations. I really am passionate about connecting young professionals and getting people involved in the community because that's at the end of the day what I'm all about.
Hi everyone, my name is Binsen Gonzalez. I'm a bilingual marketing communications specialist with over 6 years of experience. I've worked with brands like Touch of Modern, based out of Silicon Valley, to startups locally here. I've led projects that have been funded by the Knight Foundation. And I actually also went to a liberal arts school in Boston. And I think one of the interesting things is growing up in this era of our time, I've been able to feel like I've been a global citizen, even though I am deeply rooted in Miami. So I'm really excited to hear what we're about to say in relation to that, in relation to being a millennial. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Rebekah Monson. I run a local media company called Where By Us. We run a publication in Miami called The New Tropic. It's targeted at millennials in the urban core. I'm also a business owner, and all of my employees are millennials, so I feel your pain. And I'm the Oregon Trail generation as well. So I'm really excited about this because I do have a very different perspective, I think, as a 35-year-old than some of our employees do. But they're teaching me things every day in the same way that as you manage anyone, you learn, right? So I'm really excited to talk about this because there are a lot of challenges for this generation, but there are also some really resilient and kind of exciting energy that I see in our younger employees that I think is going to be a really great thing for our country and for the world.
Hi, my name is Pandwe Gibson. I run a makerspace here in Miami called EcoTech. So we support companies that are doing all kinds of inventions within the green tech movement. So utensils made from potatoes to electric motorcycle companies to whatever you could think of that fits in the tech utensil consumer product space. I guess I am a millennial, which is why I'm on this panel, and I'm from Earth, so I've lived everywhere. I've lived literally in about 4 different continents. I'm originally from New Orleans, so I have a southern roots, but I've lived everywhere all over the country and have attended both liberal arts and tech schools and taught, been a principal, so work with millennials in different standpoints, and I now manage and employ people across all the generation spectrum. So I would love to speak to it from that standpoint.
Perfect. Thank you guys very much. And as I told you, we have an outstanding panel. And if you guys didn't realize that before, you guys realize that now after the introductions. This is going to be a good little bit that we have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the very first question. And anybody, I'll open it up to the entire panel. But basing it off of a little bit of the discussion that we heard in the presentations that we received from before, my first question is going to be, how do you feel that millennials define the middle class in comparison to what the true description is of the middle class?
I'll start. Oh, go
Yeah, please.
So I was thinking about, I think for some millennials, this question itself is so archaic. Like when I saw this question, the first thing I wrote was hack. Right? And I remember when I graduated from college, I came back to Miami and I met with so many mentors. And one of them, the former mayor of Miami, told me, if you don't see it, you have to make it yourself. Right? And so I think the notion of just, for a young person, of moving forward to be middle class isn't even part of the mindset. It's more along the lines of, how am I going to thrive with all those circumstantial challenges that I have in front of me, right? And so, I created an equation, right? It's like 1 is a way to live a certain lifestyle you want, right, as a young person, because I think we see the world in a slightly different perspective from generations before us, that we do want to be happy in the jobs we have, and we do want to feel fulfilled, but at the same time, we have a lot of circumstantial challenges, right? So it's like lifestyle over constraints that we exist in, right? So I would reframe that question, and I think for us, the mindset of the millennial today is very much in line with what Einstein said, that you can't solve a problem with the same mindset that it was created with, right? So middle class, archaic notion, that's my 2 cents.
I think that's interesting. I'm sorry, you go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think it's important, that the American dream in the sense of the word that my parents are baby boomers, the American dream for us is really at risk. the cost to entry for new businesses is higher than ever. So whereas my father could have gone with $10,000 to the bank and started a new business, that's impossible now. The price of home ownership is higher than ever. There are now articles coming about saying, is home ownership actually a myth? Should millennials rent longer? It's okay to stay home. Don't go broke to own a property, because we now know that where you used to turn I see the heads going like this. You used to buy a home so you could sell it and retire. You sometimes can't do that anymore. So home ownership's cost of entry for businesses and student debt is higher than ever. So our generation, God bless us, is facing things that other generations just never faced. So, and then when you hear these numbers, that middle class, I heard $45,000 is the average, that's not even taking into account, hate to be the Debbie Downer, that we now live in a society where we need vehicles to get anywhere. I mean, we try so hard for what it's worth to be a mass transit culture, but I mean, it is absurd that my husband and I were newlyweds. We have to have 2 cars. And let me tell you, without 2 cars, we'd both lose our jobs. You have to drive to get to work. So and the cost of rent is now higher than ever. So parents' generation spent maybe 5%, this number I'm making up, but nowadays we have to spend 20% of our income just to rent property. So there's a lot of really new obstacles that my challenge to other generations when they hear, oh, the work ethic is different. Well, there's a whole new set of challenges. How many of the baby boomers came out of school with $150,000 worth of debt and walked into a $42,000 a year job? Talk to me about that stress. Okay, so exactly. So I think it's a different game, and the playing field's not as level as it used to be.
Yeah, a lot of differences.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I was going to hit on some of those things too. So along with that, the home ownership is a huge deal. That is the biggest driver of wealth for you guys, and we don't have access to it. And then on the flip side of that, we're waiting longer to get married, if we get married at all. There's some data out there that suggests that the rate of married couples, right, will be like less than half of what it is now when we are 40, right? So what does that mean? There's a lot of economic incentive that comes along with building those kinds of relationships, but marriage itself is becoming sort of a thing of the upper class instead of lower classes, right? And then no kids, right? On the flip side of that, we are, because we don't have any of these constraints, highly mobile workforce, right? So cities, I think, are going to be really, and already are, competing really hard to get people into the knowledge economies in this generation. So, you guys were saying, I'm a citizen of the world, I'm a global citizen. We have no allegiance to a place. And so, as you think about how we build the cities of the future, there's a huge competitive advantage in how you tackle these issues around student debt, around people having like less disposable income that they want to spend on permanency. That's going to be a really interesting thing. And the transit thing, I think, is also a huge point, because there's certain like amenities of urban spaces that are a big draw to this generation. Statistically, we can see them moving more and more into cities, and the reason that they're choosing those cities is because they don't have to have a car. So it's a bunch of stuff like that, and I know Pandwe can talk a little bit more about it. Sorry.
Well, I didn't want to take it in a totally different direction. I want to echo sort of all the points that everybody said, but maybe to make a stark framework that we don't want to work, like millennials don't want to work. And for all of the reasons that were laid out before, like why go to work if you're working to pay somebody else? There's no sort of benefit in that structure. As a result of that, you have the people who are part of the knowledge and talented class creating frameworks where working 40, 50, 60 hours a week is not necessarily the system that we have to move in. And so I think the Einstein quote was a perfect framework for what's happening, because if you think of the shared economy, so you have Uber, you have Airbnb, you have opportunities for people to make money and not have to leave their house and maintain themselves, stay stable, and spend time doing things that they love with family, friends, etc. You're going to see a decline in work numbers and job numbers across the board with future generations, because there is no interest in that. There's increased automation in most fields, and that's only going to increase with the advancement of technology. So I think as we think about class, I think millennials are thinking about restructuring the system because it isn't working for us. And that restructuring really has come through technology and innovation in a way that's exciting, and it's going to leave some tremendous opportunities for everybody to really rethink how society goes. But in general, you're not going to see future generations wanting to put in the type of hours that many of us do at taking after our baby boomer and Gen X mentors, but you're not going to see that from the younger generations. They don't want to work, and they don't have to, if you look at what's happening.
Do you think it's really that they don't want to work? I don't think that that's true. I think that they don't want to work for someone else. I think there's like an entrepreneurial sort of streak. Part of that is because if you look around, I mean, the workforce as a whole is aging, right? And people used to retire when they were 65, and there were big, higher paying, like, administrative jobs that opened up. And the numbers of those are just shrinking to a point where, like, I worked in a big corporation. I saw really quickly that I was going to get stuck at a lower tier of middle management. Am I going to do that for the next 20 years? No thanks, right? So how do I exit that, start my own thing, even when the costs are really high? Like, is there a way I can scrape that together and try to do my own thing so that I don't have to sit there and really just struggle at the same level of my career for 20 years or so, because I could see that, like, people in their 50s are going to be working till they're 75. So those jobs that I wanted, those aren't going to exist.
I would add also that, like, even though you choose a non-traditional course, right? You do work much harder, I think. Like, entrepreneurial routes are like, I mean, you're working on the weekends, you're having conversations with people in China, like, because it's cheaper to get manufacturing stuff there, right? So, like, I just think everything has been turned on its head, and we really do live in a global economy now.
But because we're mobile, we think of work in a different way. So if you go to places like Switzerland, if you go to places like Warsaw, people don't work the amount of hours that Americans assume that we have to put in order to have the level of quality of life that we believe that we deserve, like healthcare, food, and like a family and vacation. If you go to any other country and many other situations, not just first world, but even in some third world additional environments, they have opportunities to be with their family, and we don't have that. And I think because millennials are traveled, because we're so educated, because we've had opportunities to do study abroad, and we see how other cultures live, from my friends to people who are employed by me, they go to these islands and these different places, and they see people who don't work. And they're happy with their lives, and they're more fulfilled. I'm in programs at MIT right now, and you hear people talking about, okay, people grind all this time, and then they don't have quality of life. They're not happy. And where does happiness fit into quality of life? And I think that's something that millennials care about, whether it's workplace or not.
That's as we're obviously speaking, together, and yes, this is a panel, and everybody is really looking to see if maybe there's some questions to be answered. But as you can see, there's some obviously differences in the way that we're even talking about some things here. But being, the comment was made, being citizens of the world, right? And so millennials being citizens of the world, and what does that really even mean? But as employers and as a community, what can we do to hook millennials and really get them to stay here and work with us and work together to build something here, rather than being, than going and saying, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm not working for the man anymore. I'm not doing that. How do we do that? How do you guys feel? Go ahead.
I can take a stab at that since I have an employer.
Careful,
Hopefully
she's
by
here.
the end of this panel, I still have an employer.
Careful, she's out there.
I think the key to the millennials and keeping them working for the man or the boss is you can't box us in. We want flexibility. And work, like Pandwe said, and it's not a place we go to anymore. It's something we do. So if I choose to wake up at 6:30 in the morning, and by 7 I'm dressed, drinking coffee with the laptop on, even if I'm at my kitchen table, my time is going to my employer. That's work. And that, I think, sometimes can lead to intergenerational struggles, because there is the old school guard of
9 to 5.
work means you're sitting in your chair and I'm seeing your body here.
Yep.
But I may be more productive at home on my laptop than sitting on Facebook at your office. Not that I ever do that, Mildred.
Quit while you're ahead. Adriana. Quit while you're ahead.
So some of these, intergenerational, we just want flexibility. And I think where I see millennial generations thrive at Broward College, we really do have that upper management really does support us because they don't box us in. They say, these are the deliverables for the quarter. You're going to go get them done. I don't need to know where you are at what time and where you were sitting because I know you're going to get them done. And to the extent that you can free us up, we will produce for you.
And that's not always easy for the employers who've been longstanding, who've been rooted, who've been around for a really long time to be able to make that adjustment. And we understand that, and I think that's obviously something that we need to, coach millennials on as well. This is a two-way street. It's not just you're going to walk in and be like, hey, you got to be flexible with me. We understand that that's not. Anybody else?
Sure. So as far as communities hooking and getting people engaged in a community, one of the organizations that I was very involved with, and I know that we have counterpart and similar things going on throughout South Florida, is Emerge Broward. And I just saw someone who's working here with the conference earlier this morning. I forgot your name, hon. I'm so sorry. But she participated in our board engagement program, which actually places young people on the boards of directors of various nonprofit organizations. And the nonprofits are starved for engaged people to get involved. And this is one way that we get people immediately engrossed in a community. And then when you serve on a board, you get to know people at C-level, and you just keep going from there and opportunities arise. So it's a matter of connecting people, and I know that new Tropic is all about, I get all your newsletters every day. I see all the many events that they're sponsoring in Miami, and they're trying to get people to come together to support the underline, this project that they're working on. And in the city of Fort Lauderdale, they put Randall Vitale, who's at the time he was in his 30s, in charge of their whole visioning project. So it's about the communities themselves being willing to take that leap and put a young person in a seat of authority, put them at the big table, and let them go and see what happens. And I've seen a lot of positive things happen over the years.
I think that's right too. Like one of the other things I wanted to jump in and just say really quickly about the flexibility, right? So I say this to people who are, maybe like more mature workers, let's say, and they freak out, right? Because it's like, well, if I don't see you, I don't know, how do I keep up, right? So the burden becomes on that millennial employee or whoever it is, right? This is stuff that every worker wants now, right? Like every worker wants that flexibility to be like, I know I'm gonna get my work done, here's how, and I'm gonna keep you updated, right? The onus is on the worker, him or herself, to keep you updated, and if that doesn't happen, then that's not a feasible work environment. That said, the upside of having millennials who really, really want that above anything else, like they'll take flex work over pay, and they'll do it over and over and over again. And the upside of that is they'll also bring you a ton of efficiency, right? So if you look at this generation, two quick stats, right? So the median income of the millennials is on par with the median, of a 30-year-old. The median income of a 30-year-old now is the same as the median income of a 30-year-old was like in the 80s, right? That's scary, okay? The other side of that is we're 70% more productive now in our economy than we were then. So a lot of these middle-class jobs have been like automated out of the system. At the same time, the workers that you can get now are highly efficient. They're more efficient than any worker that you've ever had because we want to leverage these tools to get that flexibility.
Like Basecamp, for instance, right?
Or Slack or whatever.
Yeah, any type of like online project management system empowers someone to just produce at any time of the day, and also take your pet, I don't know, to the vet, or your child, if you have a child.
Which sometimes pets can be children too. Pets can be children too. Well, I think what we're hearing here is that it's flexibility really on both ends. It's really flexibility on a lot of the employers to really look at the millennials and say, hey, I have to adjust what I'm doing if I really want to grow. If you're really not trying to adjust and you're going to be hard set and say, you know what, this is the way we do things. That's how things die. I mean, that's the reality of it. That's how dinosaurs become extinct. I mean, that's just what happens. You just become set in your ways. And I think what we're hearing here on the panel is not only are the millennials starting to feel as if, flexibility is needed, what's interesting is as Mildred was talking earlier, she has millennial children. So she's starting to feel, you know what, maybe flexibility is a big deal to me as well. So maybe that's something that I need, some family time. And you're not even noticing that might be the switch that you might need, but say, hey, I'd really love a little bit more flexibility. I can do this work at home, but I can be at home while my kids are doing X, Y, or Z. So I think these are all really, really interesting points. And I know we don't have much time left, so we'll try to keep, right? I don't have much time left.
There's one really quick thing
please.
I would love to add, though,
Please.
and it was hinted at initially. It's like, I wish we also had the flexibility to move in South Florida without a car.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like that.
If you want millennials to stay here, you got to fix transit.
Yeah.
Like number one thing, fix transit.
Agreed.
Bright line like
Yeah,
tomorrow.
transit, as we all know, is a big issue, and I mean, politically and individually for not only millennials, but really for everybody. I mean, transit's a big issue. I don't know, how long people sit in traffic other than me. I mean, I live here in Broward, and I work down at South Campus, so for me, it's a lot of what I like to call my thinking time. So when I say that I get a lot of thinking time, I mean I get a lot of thinking time. So, but yeah, transit, I agree, Vincent. That's a big piece. How are we on time? We're good? Okay. So another question that I wanted to ask is, we talk about millennials being, we're talking about them and what they want from the employer. Millennials aren't always as well-rounded as they need to be. What are some of those skills gaps that you see? So, Rebekah, I'm gonna throw this to you first because you have an entire staff of millennials. What are some of those skills gaps that you see, or maybe that you experience yourself?
Yeah. So I can tell you, I think one of the things that's a misconception is that millennials are always tech savvy. Like, I think that there's actually a technical literacy gap among this generation that we see really, really strongly with, what kind of high school or elementary school you went to, right? I think there remains a tech skills gap, right, that we need to fill and we need to work really hard on. We would like to assume that everyone comes out understanding how to use a database. That's not necessarily the case. But we need that to happen. So we spend a lot of time training folks on stuff like that. The other thing is this accountability thing that we mentioned, right? Because people are they're used to doing freelance, or they've been forced into doing freelance work for a long time because there just hasn't been a job. They think about work in a different way that, there's like a sort of accountability layer that we have set up in the company through project management software, through things like that, to just make sure that you're checking off the boxes, right? And then I don't have to come and hover over you, because no one likes to micromanage, right? No one enjoys that, I don't think. And no one enjoys receiving it either. So like, what are the systems that we can put in place in a company to sort of cut back on that some as well?
Some good
those are
processes,
kind of the two main things that when we onboard new employees, we talk about a lot.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
I'd say overall, some of the soft skills that are missing are the ability to speak in public, the ability to run a meeting, the ability to organize people, a lot of these things. And even like she just said, we put in an automated layer to make people accountable. Well, where's being a self-starter and being proactive?
Yeah.
Like that's a soft skill that needs to be taught. So how do we teach people that?
But I don't think that's not necessarily generational, right? Like, I think that there are employees always who are kind of like varied on that spectrum.
True.
Right? I mean, I don't know. I hope that it's not
how
just that
do
all
we teach it?
millennials are lazy, because I don't think that's necessarily
No.
I think that would be what I would add, that I don't know that there are elements that are unique to millennials, as I have, maybe a 50% millennial staff, but then I have Gen Y, and then I have a couple baby boomers. And it's interesting to see the cross-section that when you onboard somebody, there's a specific onboarding that you need to go through. And I know there's lots of workshops about how to deal with millennial employees. I don't know that I don't know that there's a common deficiency that all millennials have. It definitely matters where they came from, what their background is, how they came to you, and all those things play a role in and whether they will be able to meet them. Are they working in a corporate environment or a startup? Are they coming from corporate to a startup? All of those things make significant difference in their ability to handle the job. And maybe that's the answer, not to generalize all millennials in one bucket, because even within the group, there's a difference, and then individual backgrounds make a significant difference.
And I think we
I
look
would
at,
argue.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, James. I would argue that the onus should really be on higher education in this country to teach soft skills to students. I mean, the best schools in the country. Thank you. And because I work for one, and I hopefully am a success story. When I went to one of the best schools in the country, I was very blessed to have that opportunity. And there was very little career coaching. I literally had to get a mentor.
We talked about that.
Yeah, and spend my own, summer earnings from waitressing to have someone teach me how to network, how to write an email that said, "Dear Dr. Coyne, I would love to meet with you. Here are some times that I mean, an Ivy League school couldn't teach you that.
Yep.
And that is a huge problem, because with the cost of education, and thank God we have places like Broward College and Miami-Dade College, FIU, FAU, where school is affordable, but we have to teach students. It's not just come get your degree, it's then how do you dress for an interview? How do you write a thank you note by hand? What are the things that are appropriate to say and not say in public in an interview to your employer, no matter what, under any circumstances? And these are things that need to be ingrained in the higher education institutional experience before graduation. And if we don't get that right in the next 10 years, we're going to blow it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got to figure this out.
Agreed. And
Maggie, you do so much work with young professionals orgs too. I really feel like young professional orgs in some ways are stepping up big time to fill that gap.
They are. It's a training ground. You can like the difference between someone who's gone through leadership in one of those organizations versus not is incredible.
Yeah.
And sometimes leading these organizations, I get frustrated when the new people come on, and I'm like, gosh, do I have to teach this guy how to run another meeting? But it's extremely important, and it is a great way for people to learn.
And it's knowing that as businesses and employers that's going to have to be something that's going to be a bend, maybe not break, that they're going to have to understand what's really coming in terms of the millennial side. What are you expecting? Maybe your expectations should be a little bit different in terms of the business side, and the millennials need to have a bit of a different expectation as they're going out into the workforce as well. I love the graphic that that was put up. I mean, with what are the great jobs? I think that's amazing, by the way. Kudos to you and your team to be able to do that, especially and target it to millennials. It's got to go both ways. Businesses and organizations have to understand what they're getting, and millennials have to understand what they're going into. And there's got to be a bit of a give and take. And I think that the soft skills gap that we've talked about, I think I've pretty much talked about it with everybody on the panel, and Rebekah's on our board at FIU for Office of Engagement. We've talked about it at length on how important soft skills are going to be here, immediately. Previously and now moving forward. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say I went to Emerson College, which is a liberal school. However, it is driven by Hollywood. Like I went to school with kids whose parents were producers and executive directors in the media industry, right? One of the really cool things that Emerson does is it really promotes internships. You cannot complete your experience at Emerson if you haven't had a couple internships. And on top of that, co-curriculars are just as important as curriculars. And they call them co-curriculars, right? Not extracurriculars. And I think that mindset too is important because, for instance, at Emerson, we had a quote-unquote real agency that was doing actual advertising work for the Olympics, right? And we actually worked with real brands. I think schools need to be able to create a safer zone for students to participate in real-world experiences outside of the classroom. And that would be dramatically impactful.
Yeah, I would agree. At Broward College, we have a really great internship program, and it's required in certain of the majors. You cannot complete the major without the obligatory internship. We actually even go so far as to do apprenticeships where you can get credit and receive additional funding from an employer if you're willing to spend some time on the employer grounds learning something. So internship, apprenticeship, all of this is really the wave of the future in higher education, and teaching students that sometimes it's really better to get a technical certificate and a credential, and credential sometimes is better than majoring in sociology. I mean, we need sociologists, but do we need as many of them as we're producing maybe in the state of Florida? That's a different argument.
And we saw that with the graph that you put up earlier with the 7-to-1 ratio in terms of, when it comes to technical degrees in terms of masters, which is amazing. So when it comes to internships and jobs and mentorship, Rebekah and I were talking a little bit about her mentorship aspect that she has going on coming up soon, and the internship. So I'm actually the lead on the Talent Development Network, which is an internship portal in Miami. And as much as it's on the institution, it's also on the businesses and the organizations and the individuals that are sitting out here to say, I want to be a part of that. I want to mentor. I want to do something to be a part of the rising tide that lifts all ships. So it's an interesting dynamic how we talk about millennials, how we're all out for ourselves, and there's so many different things that they talk about millennials. But when you go to businesses, and I've gone to many, and they're like, yeah, but what if that person doesn't end up with me? I wasted my time. That's not okay. If that's the way you're looking at it, then you're right. I wasted my time coming to you, which is okay, because then I won't come again. But understanding that you might mentor somebody or give somebody an internship that might not end up with you, but might end up with somebody else, but would be an unbelievable productive member of society that could actually end up doing some benefit for the community. So there's those little things that we talk about all the time, and when I get students that approach me all the time and say, wait, what if I come out of school with like 4 internships? Doesn't that 4 different internships, doesn't that look bad? I said, that's not right. That's not okay. You should think when you go to your employer and you say, and they look at you and be like, man, you've had 4 different internships. How do you know that this is where you want to be? Because I know I don't want to do that. It's as easy as that. I mean, how many of us have been in that position where we have to go from job to job to job before we say, there's a lot of us that'll be 40, 50 years old that say, I still don't want to know what I want to do when I grow up. And these students, we got to give them more opportunities. And that's just me kind of getting on my little box there for a second.
If I may add one point, it's like, oftentimes I think, I read this somewhere, so don't quote me, but I think 80% of the times, the last internship right before you graduate is where you actually end up getting your first job from. So it's a no-brainer, I think.
And we have to move forward as a community. I think it's really something that we need to build upon if we want to continue, and that'll just have us get a little bit better relationship with the millennial generation in general, and moving forward. So
the other thing is career changing, right?
Yep.
Not just internships, but this is the most like career jumping group of people that's ever walked the earth either, right? How many of you guys are on your 2nd or 3rd career right now, right? I mean, okay, see, we got some hands up there. I've been through 2 careers and I'm 35. Right? So what's my next one, right? I don't think that anyone in this generation is counting on getting a gold watch, right? Like that's just not going to happen for us. Hopefully we'll have a retirement plan one day, but maybe not right now, which is a problem. But thinking through kind of like, is it good for you to have someone who has a diverse background, who's bringing something else to the table in addition to this core skill set that you need? I mean, Pandwe is like one of the most qualified people I've ever known. Like you said, you've been through 3, right? So getting someone like that with experience across sectors, like the top of that T, and the depth of knowledge of having that is really valuable, and that we see that in the internship experience moving all the way up now.
Yeah. So with that being said, and maybe there's some people out in the audience that might want to know the answer to this question. What are some other ways that you can compensate? We talked about flexibility, being able to compensate millennials when it comes to the workforce. Thinking differently on how to work with millennials and doing some things to really incentivize what could really create a lot more ingenuity and thought process that might not be the normal, hey, I'm going to give you an extra day's vacation. Maybe it is the flexibility. Maybe it is something else. Anybody got any ideas that we can?
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
So I think just to reshape just a little bit, I think for employers, there has to be a thought about why even bother to hire a millennial, right? And I think the benefit is because the economy, the workforce, the work product and the results of companies need to change to meet the demands of the emerging markets, right? And in order to do that, you need people who are open-minded and thinking from that framework, who aren't so staunched in the current system, to be able to help companies maneuver into that new space so that companies can live. So in my lifetime, I've watched entire industries die. Kodak is dead. And it was huge. So as people think about what made money, what was successful business in the past, and start thinking about how to engage in the future market, the benefit of hiring millennials is immense, right? Because they've had access and interest and less shaping by the current ecosystem, so they can help companies pivot in ways that they may not be envisioning at that moment. With that said, I'll give you an example. Uber, not in America, but in Colombia, because it's illegal here, refuses to hire anyone over 25. It will not hire anyone over 25 for their offices in Colombia. So start thinking about, well, why are these companies putting these types of things in place? And look at where they are on the stock market, right? As you're thinking about your company and thinking about hiring and thinking about who makes sense, there's a reason for why these frameworks exist. So with that said, the thought is, how do you screen for the right millennial for you? That's a whole nother conversation. And that becomes, how do you screen for the right staff member for you, period? As someone who has hired extensively within those three careers, being the employer in all three of those spaces, the thing that I can say that I'm just learning now is that you don't hire for the technical skill. That's the last thing that you look for.
Can they learn?
That's the easiest thing that you look for, right? The most important thing is, can they learn? Can they think critically, right? And that's millennial or anybody else. Can they learn? Can they think critically? Are they a self-starter? Or do you have to stand over them, right? And every business needs people that can pivot and make that change. And then you look for the technical skill. If you look at this panel, you have a significant number of people with a liberal arts background. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook. If you look at the tech giants and who founded these companies, majority liberal arts backgrounds. Just something for us to think about when we're thinking technical, vocational. Most of the people on the top of the list, Fortune 500 companies, even if they're in the tech sector, most likely if they're in the tech sector, have a liberal arts background, because it's about critical thinking. You're not training people to do a specific job, but you want people who are able to pivot, and then you want to think about how you maintain them in your organization, which I guess is the next question, so I'll wait.
Yeah, your tools will always change. How many systems, every time there's a new software system, every business in the world is like, oh, new software. What you want, I mean, one of the things that you get as a benefit from millennials is they don't care, right? Like, a lot of them are proficient enough that they'll jump back and forth and they don't mind. But getting back to what you were saying about things other than money and compensation and whatever, I mean, I think if there were a way, and actually you see this in policy, right? So one of the biggest things around right now that I think is a super huge success is how they're doing student loan forgiveness for people who work in the public sector and work at 501c3s. And if any of you guys are involved with organizations that are in the public sector or in nonprofits, I would be leveraging that as hard as you can. Because you're getting really, really highly qualified people who know they're not going to make any money, but if they can get that debt load off their back, that is a huge thing to a lot of people.
Absolutely. Anybody
it's
else?
a multi-year commitment too,
Yeah,
right?
so
they have to work at a certain company or whatever, what, 10 years?
Yeah, 7 to 10 years.
And that goes back to one of my previous questions on how do you establish somebody to have some roots. Once you get them into your company and your business and your organization for about 4 years and you do the loan forgiveness, and you're looking at somebody who's really dedicated and has been, and it's, I mean, I've been with FIU now 15 years. If it wasn't, there's some things that have me there for the long haul for a reason.
The other thing is leadership opportunity, James.
And
like how were you able to stay there is because there were places for you to go in the organization. And
the trajectory and showing, it's not so much, when you tell students, I mean, I think the panel will agree, I'm going to hire you a minimum wage, but when you tell a millennial, but if you do what you need to do and you work as hard as you say you are willing to work, you're going to have the opportunity to be in upper management quicker than most. They're going to say, all right, I'll take it. Challenge them. show them. Say, hey, this is a generation of young people that want to be challenged, that want to say, hey, you know what, I can do that. Yeah, absolutely. I'd rather make $12 an hour rather than 15 with the opportunity to have upward mobility, which many of us here understand that's key, but knowing that at 21 is big. So is there anything else that you guys can come up with?
A couple of things that I have to brag on. Ultimate Software, which is a major technology company right here in Broward County. They're in Weston. They were recently named by Glassdoor as the #1 cloud company, public cloud company to work for. This is the #1. I'm not talking about not any company in San Francisco. The #1 tech company, cloud company, is right here, like
Weston.
10 miles away. Yeah. And some of the things that they do to get all of these fantastic ratings from their employees and from Forbes and Fortune and others are that they give paid volunteer time. They actually will allow their employees to pick a charity of their choice and spend a certain number of hours volunteering with them. They also are very flexible with their schedules, very family friendly. And I don't know if they do this, but a concept that I really like and that I think is great that any company really could do is Google has this 20% time, where as long as you get your job done in the 80% of the time that you spend at work, they let you do whatever you want, any little side project you want to work on in your other 20%.
With company resources.
Right. And that's amazing.
And that's led to huge products for Google, by the way.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing that I think is important in what you're talking about is the family friendliness, right? The motherhood penalty has to stop with this generation. The most educated people in the millennial workforce are women right now. More women are getting college degrees. And if we're going to continue to penalize women when they leave the workforce to have a child, that our middle class is going to continue to shrink. In that way, because they're so important to those jobs, and not being able to come back and be at the same level, much less take a step up because you've taken the time to have a family. Like I think that when I talk to my peers, that's a huge thing that we all think needs to go.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
Good. Anything else?
I think it's about having a company where you work that is open-minded also, that accepts all people from all different walks of life, where you can also get cultural and social equity in addition to, financial equity. Like the company where we work for, it's a music technology company, where I'm the CMO at the moment. And everyone just loves what we do because we're creating music technology that hopefully will change the world. Yep. And as cliche as it sounds, millennials live for that. I live for that. So
I think everyone on this panel personally thinks we're changing the world, or at least our community through our jobs. Would you agree?
We'd like to.
Yeah, we are the change the world generation. We all personally feel that calling. And so I think back to your original question, it is our generation almost needs some incentive to stay. I'll never forget when President Armstrong hired me. He looked at my resume and he said, "Can you commit to 5 years at Broward College?" and I looked him straight in the eye and I said, "Yeah, I guess I will." And at the time it was like, oh my God, 5 years? Is this man crazy? Now I'm almost at 4 years. But it was smart of him as the CEO to put that expectation on the table. And as a result, I have carried that expectation with me. I have seen peers who have not been given or carried that same expectation, either in our organization or others. And I think it's really the onus is on the hiring manager to say, look, I know you may not stay 20 years or 15 or even 10, but can you give me 5? Because structurally, the cost of me hiring and training you, I need you at least 5 years. And that's a reasonable expectation.
Yeah.
I also think there's like a kind of secret sauce that you guys need to know about, which is millennials want mentors, I think, more than anyone else.
A lot.
It's not that I don't think that there's actually this like generational warfare from the younger people up, so much as it's like, who's gonna see that I have potential and help me reach it? I think that's a huge asset. If you can have a great mentorship program or be a mentor yourself, you're gonna get way more out of these employees.
Absolutely. And I think right now, what we're looking at when it comes to mentorship is such a huge gap, and we don't have enough people really trying to mentor and really getting out there and making the effort to mentor. So if you guys are out there and you guys have the opportunity to say, hey, listen, you know what, I do want to mentor, please approach one of us, approach me. I can definitely put you in place. I do a lot of it within the university, but not just within the university, but within the talent development network, which actually resides over the entire Miami area. And but I think I just wanted to end now with asking the panel if they have anything else that they want to put forward, that I know that they've kind of had on their minds, anything at all. Obviously, we're looking at, the millennial aspect, but if anybody has anything else to say to wrap it up, I just wanted to, let's give them a round of applause, thank the panel. So as I began the conversation today, I let you guys know, if you guys have any questions and thoughts, make sure to write those down. If you guys have any questions for me or the panel or just everybody in general, please raise your hand. We've got some microphones floating around the room. We've got one up here and we've got one over there on your right. And then we've got over here as well. So please stand.
Well, first of all, I'm so excited. I am approaching retirement. And as I approach retirement, I'm excited about those individuals who are coming behind me. And I know that I believe we're leaving, or at least I think we're leaving our world in very capable hands. I don't think that there's anything wrong with being individuals who think outside the box or literally throw the box away. Mm-hmm. I think that's what's required if we're going to be successful as a country and be successful as a world. Being a baby boomer and then having Gen X children and millennial grandchildren, potentially. I look at all that and say, it's exciting to know that there are individuals who are willing to get inside an organization and then turn it on its head, because I think that's what's needed. We have lots of young people who don't know exactly what they want to do and what they want to be, and I think it's an excellent opportunity for them to look and see and say, I've got 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 opportunities that are in front of me, and it's just a matter of me picking the one that most excites me, makes me happy, and have me come to work every day knowing that something's going to happen good for somebody. That's what I see in this. You're not the only ones at this point in time that think the way you think. There are lots of baby boomers that had the same problem, and they were diagnosed as not fitting in. There's something wrong with you.
And some of y'all were penalized, pretty heavily.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So I think that it's amazing what you've all talked about. I'm energized and excited around your conversation today. I wish all of you much success in what you're doing, and I intend to go back to my job and act like a millennial.
Over here on the right. We'll get you turned on. Hold on 1 second. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
As a parent of 3 millennials, I have learned a lot from my millennials, and as an employer to 5 millennials. So as an employer of 5 millennials, I'm proud to say that the 5 millennials that are with me have been with me since between 2005 and 2006 is when they started. Yes. And so I did not ask them, will you stay for 5 years? But it became very apparent to me as an intuitive person, ENFP, if people know the Myers-Briggs, a feeler, intuitive, and perceptive. I knew that something was different. And they have raised children, and some of you in the room who work with me as a client know that some of those children are in the background on calls. But I knew what it took to keep them with me, and I also agree that the millennials have rubbed off on the other individuals in the workforce. And we all wanted some of the things that the millennials are asking for. We just didn't have permission to ask for those things. So I do thank you for how you've worked with us. Mentors, absolutely. My millennials respect me, and they appreciate the fact that I was not broke graduating from college. I worked and went to school. It took me 9 years to get my degree. And as a single parent who was lower middle class, accumulated some wealth. So all of my millennials owned homes as middle income earners by the age of 30. Wow. So we work together and we learn from each other. So I appreciate this dialogue today. When I hear certain things, does it always resonate with me? I'm sure there's people my age and older sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, we just need to teach you a couple of things about life. And every time I have that feeling, I think, okay, I'm still learning, and you're learning. So we're learning together. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I've heard a lot about soft skills this morning. I work with young people who've aged out of foster or relative care. And a lot of times those young people are academically behind the curve. And so when I'm working with them, soft skills are very important. But the question I have for, I'm sorry, the lady in the white, I can't remember your name. Adriana. Yep. I think it's important that we help our young people to understand that those soft skills or the things that in communication, public speaking. You know, when I went to school, we had to have a public speaking class before we could graduate high school. I think we've missed the mark someplace in terms of helping young people understand that communication probably is the strongest or most important asset in anything that you do. So how do we get our young people to develop those skills before they get to college? Because once they get to college, it is so difficult to go back and try to recreate the wheel. So I'm thinking that we may need to start to mentor young people in that junior or senior year of high school, where we're actually having them to learn how to speak, how to ask the right questions, how to advocate for themselves, so that they're very clear, maybe not about the direction that they want to go, but how to ask the questions to get them on the right path.
Sure, thank you for that question. I do agree with you that by college it's often too late. Really the challenges start in kindergarten. Many of us already know that. That's why some of the early literacy, early childhood coalitions are so critically important. I will, to his credit, Superintendent Robert Runcie from the Broward County Public Schools agrees with us on this issue and notices and has supported public speaking through a huge Broward County debate initiative, whereby he is encouraging all the principals to ramp up their, traditional debate programs. When I was in high school, debate was for the geeks like me. Now it's the cool thing to do. You go to football practice and then you go to debate practice, and that is critically important because being able to articulate your point and get to the point is the skill that's going to help you get the job. So absolutely, the good news is that we're doing something in public education to help.
Can I add something?
I wanted to add to that also.
Okay.
So we have a Green Scouts program at EcoTech, which focuses on seniors in high school and college students to provide them with traction and opportunities within our company and then within the 26 companies that we also serve. One of the rules for companies in our makerspace is that they get a mentor and that they mentor somebody else. And we're not the only company with that structure. A lot of corporates have that kind of a framework. So you can talk to me for my companies or look into the companies that already exist and are local to your community. Many of them, I'm sure, would be willing to take on mentees or interns in a formal or in an informal position. We also are having an event called EcoFest, where there'll be job opportunities, opening career sources there, opportunities for interns. I think we have 7 schools confirmed now in our local area. It's in Miami. But for people to get access to internship, job opportunities, healthy food, tech movement opportunities, et cetera, it's just a big festival around where the opportunities exist in both economic development and sustainability within the community. And I can share that information also.
And we have the opportunity to provide internships, but finding companies that are willing to work with these young people is a huge challenge. So I would like to talk to you, number one, but more importantly, when we're talking about that internship, our internship is paid, so we pay the young people to be able to work for that company. But to help them understand that they need the mentor, I think, is the biggest challenge.
So I'll give you a concrete example. So we have a company called Alias. It's an electric motorcycle company. It was started by a designer and an architect. And you think they'd be great. They've got their iPad, they've got their investor, but they don't actually know how to build the electric bike, right? They know how to make a pretty picture of it. So they went and connected with local mechanics and electricians through a program we have called our fellowship program to really create that connection from blue collar to green collar. And for me, it's really about the collisions between these different populations, because that's how you develop really exciting new age companies, right? In the past, you didn't have the electricians over here and the white collar over there, and that's how we got forward. So we're putting those kind of people together. The four of them got together and made this great prototype, and none of them know anything about social media, and none of them know anything about HR management. But we're right down the street from Miami-Dade College, where they graduate students with HR management degrees, right? And those individuals typically end up at Walmart, because they don't know that there's this great startup Alias that just started that needs somebody with HR management skill. They just went from two founders to 4 people. They've got to think about payroll. They've got to think about all these things. So we took an intern from Miami-Dade to work in the company for a couple months until they could get vetted and comfortable. And now they have a great team that can go after developing out their product and developing out the administrative structure. And that's what my company does, sort of create those connections for those individuals. So it's great for the company, it's great for the community members, and it's great for the university students or high school students who need connections.
I think, if I may, Pandwe is on. She's got the golden ticket here. That's exactly what it's about, connecting with the higher education institutions. So the Broward Workshop in Broward County, which is the top 100 CEOs in Broward County, they have connected with all of the Broward County institutions of higher ed, so NOVA, US, FAU, et cetera, to build an internship toolkit. So employers can actually register and say, I have these 150 internship openings, and we can plug our students in there. And what we have realized in building this is that this only works if we do it together as a coalition, as a community. It can't be Broward College wants interns, FAU wants interns, FIU wants interns. We all have to do this together. And once we all get on that bus, then we will move this country forward. But until then, we got to make sure that all the right people are on the bus, and then we can start driving.
Yeah, and I think that's,
I'm voting for her.
Yeah.
I really want to add something, though,
Please.
that I think our mentality, even on the panel right now, is slightly linear when you ask that question. And I think you were really insightful in saying it starts before they get to college. Arts programs across the country are suffering. And before you even get to the point of getting on stage and debating an idea, you can get on stage and do improv and have fun and laugh, right? I think we need to teach and try to work towards a holistic human being. Ultimately, that would be ideal, right? But like was mentioned earlier, right? The founders of some of the most globally impacting startups had a very different perspective on the world. For instance, Steve Jobs, right? Like he looked at fonts to make his product differently, right? It was from an artistic, human perspective. So I think you guys, you're in a generation that has a lot of voting power, so much voting power, and you mobilize way more than younger people do. The arts need help, because I think if you are able to crack that nut, everything else is going to be much smoother.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So this is a conversation that's very, very dear to my heart, because I opted to do my dissertation on intergenerational leadership. And so to basically see and hear 3 years worth of research coming out of the mouths of all 6 of you, it is really, really overwhelming for me, because we're at a point in time where perhaps for the first time, we're seeing multiple generations, up to 4 generations, working together in the same space, whether it's a physical space or a virtual space. So my question is, and this might be a bit unfair, but my question is, what is the key to effective shared intergenerational leadership in the workplace?
So I love that question, and I think it probably is the same answer to effective diverse from a multicultural and effective diverse from a religious, right? So if we go to my sector, tech, huge articles have come out over the past year about how they have no women and they have no minorities and no blacks in particular in their entire leadership structure, right? And there's all kind of research and data as to how that's actually hindering innovation. And so for me, this diversity in general, like I've worked very hard when I ran schools to have that be a part of my hiring practice there, when I was doing organizing to be part of the hiring practice there, and you know, when it comes to having an intergeneration, and I'm a millennial leader who's hired baby boomers and has baby boomers on my board and on my staff because it's important to have that dialogue in the room and to be very candid and rigorous about it. So I'm not suggesting that it's easy, but the same need that we probably have as a nation to have conversations about race, right, and culture, the same need to be able to have open conversations about age, religion, and all of those other things within a professional environment with a professional tone. And as a country, we haven't proven that we are capable of doing that. But in the organizations that are able to be successful at that, right? So Google, for example, went immediately and tried to address the problem in terms of their workforce issues in terms of gender and in terms of race and started hiring people. Starbucks, same thing in terms of their executive, and literally put out public manifestos. Nobody's saying they did it right, but they attempted it, which most companies don't. And somebody who is of the world and has been in very diverse environments and then has come back to the South. I'm from New Orleans, right? Although we mingle a lot more than you all do here in South Florida, I'm just gonna be candid. Figuring out how to have environments that are less monolithic in every single way actually is what fuels innovation. And just being real candid about it, like we talk about it in the office place and we try to create openness, just in celebrating birthdays, being really thoughtful about how you do that in very informal ways, finding ways to capitalize, include, and honor diversity as opposed to shy away from it.
Yeah, the diversity point is huge, and I think like we all our advisors in our board, baby boomers and Gen X. And you know why? Because we need to know like the things that you guys carry with you. And back to the mentorship point again, it's this open exchange of ideas that makes any company, in my opinion, successful or not, right? And so how many voices do we have in the room? How many perspectives? How many different kinds of users can we understand because we have these people in our networks? I think that's super, super important.
I would add also, like, I think mission-driven organizations are really able to move beyond age or gender or sexuality or race. When I think a group of people of diverse backgrounds come together for a mission, everyone realizes that you alone do not have the answer. And together you can hopefully get to the mission, right? Which is why I think it can become so inspirational to work with people that are so different from you when you have a mission in mind. That thing makes all the world of difference.
This question is really near and dear to my heart. So I'm 31 years old. I have 5 direct reports, and 4 of them are older than me. And that was particularly hard for one of my former direct reports, who actually doesn't report to me anymore for personal health reasons that she had. But when we started together, she blatantly said, "You're my daughter's age." Like, you mean my boss is my daughter's age? Is this a joke? And we became the best of friends. But the onus was on me as the new manager to be extra professional, courteous, and provide extreme clarity for the expectations for the role. Recognizing that it is not easy, and at times it is going to be painful if you've been with a company for 20 years, and then here comes this fresh young blood who, hello, I'm the new boss. Really? And so I had to wear that different pair of glasses, and my management perspective is really, we hold hands and we go up the hill together. And that's just how we got to do it. And the clearer you can be, the more these generational kind of taboo things go away. This is the project, these are the deliverables, let's check off the boxes together, and how can I help you get there?
Thank you. Before I hand off to the next audience member, I just need to say that this has certainly been one of the most vibrant and real conversations that I've participated in a very, very long time. So thank you very much. Thank you.
I think we've only got 5 more minutes. So what we're going to do is I'm going to let the panelists know that we're just going to kind of just make the answers a little bit quicker, maybe just a little bit more concise. And then also with everybody in the crowd, we'll go ahead and do the same thing. So I think we've got a couple people with their hands up, and then we'll end with that.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Simona Falana. I actually work for OIC of South Florida, and I am a millennial. I graduated with my master's degree, but my undergrad is in liberal arts and physical education.
There we go.
And I decided to go to a STEM background because that's where the jobs are more marketable. However, there is a conversation that's not being had with our organizations, with our big-time companies, especially here in the South Florida area. When I left South Carolina, where I went to school, I found it very hard to transition back home because they're not hiring millennials. Even though you have the skill set, you don't have the experience. And a lot of times I get, oh, you have everything that I want, but you don't have the experience, especially here in South Florida. And if you go to San Francisco, Washington, D.C., New York, they're hiring us. However, here in South Florida, how do we bridge that gap? How do we say, I have the skill set, I graduated with soft skills. Most times when I have conversations with people, they never believe I'm only 28 years old. However, how do I tell these organizations, companies, that you need me? Because in actuality, the way the organizations are moving, I have a degree in transportation. And you guys mentioned we lack transportation here in South Florida. I have all the knowledge. I graduated with a master's, which is a very slim master's to get. Wow. But they're not hiring individuals like millennials because they're stuck with those people who we've been doing it this way, this way, this way. So how do we... because we have to have this conversation not just in this room, but outside. How do we have that conversation with those organizations, especially here in South Florida?
Go ahead.
This is a tough thing. I think part of it Binsen kind of kicked off the conversation with, which is if it doesn't exist, you have to make it. Right. And that is the hardest path. But it's one of those things where if you keep hitting the dead end, like there's this point where you have to start making new things. And I think everyone up here has kind of done that in one way or another. I also think that part of the experience question is like, it can be overcome to some degree with homework, right? So as you're going into these jobs, come into that job interview with 5 or 6 things that you can help that company or that organization do right this minute, that you can see from the outside. And I think like when we get applicants that can come in and do that and say, you're missing this opportunity and here's how I can help you get there, I care a lot less that they've been at a Fortune 500 or at another startup or whatever than that I can see that they're thinking about my product and about my problems, and they have solutions.
I would also say Miami, I think South Florida is very relationship driven.
100%. Get into that young YPO with Maggie over there.
Yeah. So like I think you really have to be able to tap into who are the decision makers, and somehow, some way, you hack your way into a relationship with them.
Absolutely. I was going to say, so the director of transit is going to be at EcoTech on November 4th because we're doing an event, Hack for Transit. Not that you're looking, but if you know someone else who's looking.
OIC just got really mad.
What
just happened? I don't know.
No, but I'm not suggesting that she use the connection now. I'm just saying exactly what he said, right? Exactly. It's about connections and connections are not about when you need them.
Yeah, they're
Right?
you've
So
been
you
there for a
build
long
the
time.
relationship now and you create opportunities and pipelines for other people. So it's not
Yes.
necessarily like it's something that you tap into, but that you tap into the relationship so that you have it long moving forward and you get mentored. You should get mentors for where you want to go, not for where you are.
Yep.
Yes.
And this is the partnership generation.
Yeah, and-
Millennials have more partnerships across industries, across sectors, across ages. I mean, everyone up here can probably point to you, we are huge on networks. Like, we invented social networks, guys. Like, this is our jam. So we should leverage that, right?
And we don't want to discourage. I know that we made the joke about OIC wouldn't want to lose you, but the reality is, and just to use a sports analogy, as a company, corporation, or business, wouldn't you want a coaching tree where you say, you know what, I've had members of my organization and my business move on and doing these amazing and great things.
And I'm not suggesting that you move on. What I'm suggesting is that they're partnership opportunities, they're ways to leverage that relationship. I'm suggesting that you bring them something. So down the line, when you're looking at something else, you've already built a strong relationship with the people within those organizations.
Absolutely.
I have to tell you, just to address that very quickly, I got my current job because I was basically stalking my boss to be a mentor. And I was doing a master's program and wanted to learn more about marketing and economic development. So I did it as a elective class, and I basically just worked for free. So there's always the opportunity to work for free, volunteer. And then the opportunities arise afterwards.
Yeah, I've never gotten a job as a resume. And to be honest, if I think about the people that I've hired, there's always been some degree of separation from the individuals that I've hired. And that's something that puts millennials at a disadvantage because there's so many generations in the workforce. If there's a community that's going to have a direct connection, it's the Gen X or Gen Y or whatever's right above us, right? That's the thing that puts us at a disconnect because the people in charge are still the baby boomers. But you've got to find a way to still jump that level and make the connection because the generation between us is like, they don't want to work either. They're at home. They're at home and they want to take care of their kids. If you look at any research about the Gen Y, they want to put in their 40 hours and they want you to leave them alone, right? So it's huge opportunities for you to jump over that while you're still establishing and develop the mentor relationships that can help not just you. You graduated with a whole class of people and bring those resources to Miami.
Next question, go ahead.
Over here. Lisa Perez, HBL Resources. I'm not sure if you guys were here in the morning session, but I talked a lot about soft skills, and making great managers from employees and line staff. And regarding soft skills in communication, I have an opportunity to do generational diversity training. And so I speak to the boomers, the Xers, and sometimes some millennials are in my workshops. What would be one piece of advice, or what could I bring back to share with the boomers and Xers that are in those leadership positions on how best to work and embrace your generation?
So consider rethinking our movement. So one of the things I often hear people say is like, oh, they're so disrespectful because they're on their phones, right? So consider that the frames that you use, that other generations use for us, are probably not, they don't have all the same meaning that people think that they have. For instance, we use Slack. All of our calendar connections, everything is right here. I do the majority of my business here. If I'm standing in front of you and I'm putting something in, I'm actually taking in what you're saying and documenting it right there so that it doesn't get lost. So I love the comment that you made because I always think about when people talk about millennials, my grandparents and how they talked about the baby boomers and all the weird and extraordinary things that came out of that generation. Your dress, your clothes, how you spoke, how you literally went against the U.S. government with the war. Like literally what the baby boomers did was so starkly contrast the generation before that it was a tear. Millennials aren't doing anything that is actually that intense. Right. And yet there's this significant labeling and misunderstanding about what's going on. And so I would ask to reframe how certain things are seen and to see them as opportunities as opposed to an immediate response of disrespect or disappreciation or like take a moment to tolerance, right? That's what it takes, period. Like just some tolerance and some rethinking about how activities can have different meanings.
Outcome oriented too is the thing that I would suggest. I think that has worked really well for us to be like the deliverables point. Like we all want to know, like, what do you want from me? Because I will give you that plus.
Yeah.
I will give you 100 that. But if I don't know what you if I can't get a clear communication from you about what you're expecting on the other end, that makes me really nervous, and it makes me feel like you're moving the goalposts on me.
Yep.
So talk to me about outcomes that
Yep.
you expect.
Yeah, and we got 2 more questions, so what we're going to do is, obviously, I know we're a little bit over time, so I apologize, but I think that this is great conversation, great dialogue. Just 2 final questions, and then we'll
Okay,
go
thank
ahead.
you. Hi, good afternoon, and thank you all so much for your enthusiasm and your expertise in sharing with us what it is you all do and how you think. I am a baby boomer. I'm a baby boomer, but I'm passionate about entrepreneurship. So I'd like to talk to each one of you to, get some ideas on how to move an idea forward. Also, I wanted to give a suggestion about soft skills. And one of the things that I'm involved in is Toastmasters. If you want to have young people learn how to do public speaking, one of the places that I have found is phenomenal is Toastmasters. It gives them the opportunity to learn leadership. They would have a mentor. They could be a mentor, and they could also learn how to conduct a meeting, conduct meetings, and use PowerPoint, those sorts of things. So I just wanted to share that with you and with the audience in terms of soft skills.
Thank you for that.
Thank
we
you very
have
much.
a Toastmasters chapter at Broward College. So you raise a great point, and it's open to the community, it's open to students or anyone else in the professional community, and they meet monthly.
Is it my turn?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
It is your turn. You've been waiting patiently with your hand up, sir, and I appreciate
have
that.
indeed. My name is Herman Laverne Jones, and I run a theater company. And I happened to meet Newton at 105.1. He was advertising his piece today, and I was advertising an audition for a production called I Have a Dream, a gospel musical, Broadway gospel musical on Martin Luther King Jr. And to plug it, it's going to be at the Coral Springs Center for the Arts on January the 13th, that Friday. And what was interesting, Binsen, you had mentioned the arts. Well, I've been doing plays for 44 years, and I started when I was a grown man, so I'm a baby boomer to say the least. I am. Oh, my God. And I know how it helped me. I came out of a little small area in North Carolina called Garner, and I used to go around New York City saying, I'm from Ghana, and they said, you from West Africa? I said, no. It says, spell it. I said, G-A-R-N-E-R. They said, that's Garner, not Ghana. And I said, all right, I got to work on that. But I know that through the, for real, through the arts, I've got a master's degree from UNC Chapel Hill, and I've had a chance I was a soap opera actor at one point in my life. I helped create this huge festival in Winston-Salem called the National Black Theater Festival, which has now generated $700 million for that community over the past 28 years. And I was roughly 34 when I started working with that project. I'm now in my 60s. And what I've seen through the arts, if you do start early enough, it can change the paradigm of critical thinking that we all have. I would dare say probably most people sitting in this room has had some experience debating, talking, being pushed to the front, whether you wanted to be there or not, whether it's at church, whether it's in a community, doing things. And I say, connect with the arts. The arts is a place that I call it edutainment, where you get an education and entertainment at the same time, and it creates this kind of platform that the kids and us older folk too we can show off our skills. And lots of times people are begging for that. Help me develop my skill. So thank you and good night.
Thank you. So I want to say thank you to the panelists. I want to say thank you to you guys, and thank you to the OIC. I think that this was a great session. Please, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you guys very much, and I know that the panelists and I have already discussed, if you guys have any questions, please, you feel free to approach us, approach any of the speakers that presented before. We look forward to having conversation, and enjoy your day. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Oh, got an announcement.
James did forget about our poll. As you'll see on your screen, we have a poll question. We actually have 2 really quick poll questions. So if you could pull out your smartphone or your cell phone.
How millennial is that? Pull out your smartphone.
Go ahead and pull out your phone. And basically, you're sending a text to the number 22333. And you're texting the actual message, OICSFL. So first thing you're going to do is set up your text using your message tool to the number 22333. And the actual message that you're sending, it's OICSFL. That's to set it up. And once you're done, you simply respond to the question above, what work-life benefits are most attractive to the millennial professional? Select A, B, C, or D. Your choices: work flexibility, telecommuting, etc. B, community engagement or social responsibility. C, professional development opportunities. Or D, on-site childcare. And once you're done, if you just look up, I'll have an idea of whether to move forward. And so you get to see what actually stands out most for the millennial generation. Has everyone voted? Show of hands. Yes? Okay, a few more to go. And there we see our responses for poll question number 1. The most valuable or most attractive work-life benefit is, of course, that flexibility, telecommuting, and so forth. Okay? Ready to go to our next poll question? Certainly click on. Next one, please. And here's our second question. You simply have to go ahead and select A, B, C, or D. Read the question out loud. What can organizations do to attract and retain the millennial professional? By offering career lattices, mentoring opportunities with seasoned professionals. Certainly we heard some of those things. Enhanced opportunities. I guess everyone can see clearly. Community-based initiatives that surround the millennials with networks and internships, or OJT. And certainly that's the perspective in the room. Okay, it's changing. Interesting, right? So certainly we're seeing that the community-based initiatives that surround millennials is standing out, the networks and resources to help us all move forward. Okay, everyone, thank you for your input. We really do appreciate you being here. And again, hope you have a great rest of the day, and we look forward to seeing you bright and early tomorrow morning for day 2 of our summit. Remember, we have some wonderful speakers, congressmen and so forth, so we look forward to seeing you all, okay? Thank you and have a wonderful afternoon. Do remember to post to social media your notes, your high points and so forth from today, okay? Thank you again.